If you say yes, she said, we're getting married tomorrow? I'll give you my hand, and something I've been hiding. My name is Garrett Thorne, and 3 months ago, I stood alone in an empty apartment watching my wife leave without looking back. She didn't cry. I did. Quietly. Later. She'd been having an affair for nearly a year, with a man from her firm. I found out through a shared Google Calendar. She forgot to log out on my laptop. They took weekend trips labeled client outreach. But that's not what this story is about. It's about the woman who knocked on my door the day after my divorce finalized. Her name was Alora. She said she was his wife. The man mine left me for. And she was calm. Almost clinical. He lied to both of us, she said. But we can do something different. I didn't know what she meant until she pulled out a marriage license. Already signed. All it needed was my name. I'll explain everything after the ceremony, she said. But if you say yes, I promise, you'll never regret it. I should have walked away. But I didn't. Because she smiled, and something in her eyes said, this isn't about love. It's about knowing who's really holding the cards. The chapel was barely lit. A Thursday morning. No guests. No vows, just signatures and silence. I kept thinking, this isn't real. But it was. Alora wore a navy coat instead of a dress. She handed the officiant cash, signed where she needed to, and never touched my hand. We left with a certificate and nothing else. In the car I asked, now what? She glanced at me. Now I show you what your ex-husband has hidden from you. I paused. You mean? My husband, she corrected. Our shared problem. She drove us to a downtown storage unit. Inside, silence, dust, and secrets. One box at a time she opened her life. And his. Bank statements. Passports. Photos. Names I didn't recognize. There are 3 women, she said, laying the files out on a metal table. All recently married. All suddenly alone. It was like watching a spider web from above. Lines I hadn't seen before now tightening around a center. He's not just a cheater, Garrett, she said, folding her arms. He's an extractor. He finds people on the edge. And takes everything. I looked at her. And me? She finally looked back. You're the endgame. I stared at her like she'd spoken a language only grief understood. Alora. I didn't have anything left to take, I said. She nodded. That's what made you the perfect bait. She opened a drawer and pulled out a phone. Not hers, not mine. It buzzed as she powered it on. His burner, she said. I cloned it before I left. Messages loaded. Photos. Notes. Voice recordings. One stood out. A voice memo titled, Garrett, Phase 4. She pressed play. Once Alora cracks, he'll fold. Play the apology. Suggest closure. Keep him feeling like a man. Once he's remarried, we dissolve his remaining credit line and use his name to apply for the estate accounts. His identity's clean. Uncontested. No history. Perfect shell. It was her voice. My ex-wife. Monotone. Surgical. Practiced. The phone slid from my hand. Alora didn't flinch. She was never in love with you, she said. She was in business with him. Until I flipped the game. I looked at her. So why me? Why marry me? She hesitated. Then said quietly, because the only way to trap 2 people who fake everything is to become something they think is real. A mark. Who plays dumb. We didn't go home that night. Instead, we sat in a cheap motel room 2 hours outside the city, peeling back layer after layer of deception like old wallpaper, each one worse than the last. 3 aliases. 2 shell companies. A fake non-profit tied to my ex-wife's name, with me listed as a board member I'd never heard of. He's building an exit plan, Alora explained, tapping through the documents on her laptop. Fake bankruptcy. He walks away clean while the charges fall on you. How long have you known? I asked. Since before you did, she said. But you were the only one they married. That gave you standing. I stared at the marriage certificate in her bag. Our names side by side. So this wedding. She didn't look up. Gave me leverage. There was no warmth in her voice but no malice either. She was working. Then she closed the laptop and finally looked at me. But I'm not like them, Garrett. I'm not after your name. Then what are you after? She folded her hands. Justice. She stood, walked to the door and turned back. And if we're lucky? A clean ending no one sees coming. The plan wasn't simple. But it was sharp. We'd file a joint report, Alora as the betrayed wife, me as the defrauded ex-husband. But we wouldn't just accuse. We'd present proof, sequence, motive. The The full picture. We documented everything. Fake foundations using my name. Your real estate flips run through Alora's identity. A shadow holding company registered offshore under my social security number. And at the center? I hadn't spoken to my ex since the divorce. Now she was my co-defendant in a fraud case that hadn't been filed yet. Because Alora had one condition. Don't report it until they come to you. Why? I asked. Because they always try to clean up. And that's when they slip. And she was right. A week later I got a call from a lawyer I'd never met. We're doing an audit of your previous joint accounts. Some inconsistencies. I played dumb. 2 days after that, my ex emailed me, casual, sunny, weirdly nostalgic. Thinking about reconnecting, she wrote. Want to grab coffee? I didn't reply. But I did open a fresh file on my computer. Titled, Final Move. We waited. Each day felt like being underwater, silent, dense, pressure building from every side. But Alora? She thrived in it. I watched her move like someone who'd lived inside deception long enough to memorize its rhythms. One morning, she turned her laptop toward me. They're transferring assets. Sure enough, buried in a chain of offshore transactions, my name had just been used to purchase a $3.2 million villa in Montenegro. I'd never been to Montenegro. That's wire fraud, identity theft, and interstate conspiracy, I muttered. She smiled. Now you're speaking my language. That afternoon, I made the call, not to the police, but to a federal investigator Alora had quietly worked with during her own separate inquiry. A woman who had once tried to open a case and been shut down by pressure from above. But now she had us. Alora and I handed over everything. 3 hours later, the investigator said, "We've been waiting for someone like you." The next morning, my ex-wife sent one last email. No greeting. Just a single line. "You shouldn't have married her." I stared at it for a while, then replied, "That's exactly why I did." The arrests happened quietly. No sirens. No spectacle. Just a knock on his door in the middle of brunch with his new client, and a sealed indictment with 23 counts, wire fraud, identity theft, conspiracy, and obstruction. They took him first. She was harder to pin down. My ex had always been the quieter operator, the paper trail runner. But Alora had found it all. The forged signatures, the false nonprofit grants, the offshore money orders signed in my name. And more importantly, the time-stamped messages between them. "Don't worry," she had typed. "He's too soft to fight back." She was wrong. The same week the indictment went public, I stood on the courthouse steps with Alora, not for press, not for revenge, but because we'd been subpoenaed as witnesses. As we left, she turned to me. "You know, I wasn't sure this would work." "What changed your mind?" "You didn't," she said. "You kept showing up." I laughed. "Even after the wedding?" "Especially after." We reached the car. She paused before getting in. "You ready for the part no one warned us about?" "What's that?" She smiled softly. "Learning how to live without looking over your shoulder." We never had a honeymoon. There was no first dance, no shared last name on a mailbox, no family toast over champagne. But in the quiet that followed their sentencing, him, 12 years, her, 9, something changed. I stopped waking up bracing for betrayal. Alora started leaving her laptop open. We signed the annulment papers 6 weeks after the trial. Mutually. Respectfully. No drama. It wasn't a marriage in the traditional sense. It was a mission. And now it was over. But on the day we signed, I hesitated. Not because I wanted it to last, but because I realized I'd never felt more understood by anyone than the woman who helped take down the person I once loved. "I still think about Montenegro," I told her. She smiled. "The villa that never existed." I looked it up. "It's beautiful." We stood there for a moment, near the courthouse steps where our fake marriage started to feel like something real. "Alora," I asked, "you ever think about doing something real?" She nodded once. "I do." And just like that, we parted. No kiss, no promises, no goodbye. Just a mutual look that said, not revenge, not love, just truth.